Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gaunitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. We're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 5, Text 41. Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Parihritya Kartam Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Pahihritya Kartam Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Pahritya Kartam. Please chant. Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Pahritya Kartam Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Pariktya Kartam Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Pahritya Kartam Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitrinam Nakin Karo Nayami Charajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Pahihritya Kartam. Thank you very much for chanting. The word-for-word translation, and this is by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Deva, of the demigods. Rishi, of the sages. Bhuta, of ordinary living entities. Apta, of friends and relatives, Nirnam, of ordinary men, Pitrinam, of the forefathers, Na, not, Kinkara, the servant, Na, not, Ayam, this one, Mi, debtor, Cha, also, Rajan, O king, Sarva Atmana, with his whole being, Ya, a person who, Sharanam, shelter, Sharanyam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who affords shelter to all. Gata, approached. Mukundam, Mukunda. Pahritya, giving up. Kartam, duties. And the translation, again, disciples of Srila Prabhupada. O king, one who has given up all material duties and has taken full shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, who offers shelter to all, is not indebted to the demigods, great sages, ordinary living beings, relatives, friends, mankind, or even one's forefathers who have passed away. Since all such classes of living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, one who has surrendered to the Lord's service has no need to serve such persons separately. And the purport is fairly long, so here we go. One who has not fully surrendered to the devotional service of the Lord undoubtedly has many material duties to perform. Every ordinary conditioned soul is the recipient of innumerable benefits given by the demigods who provide sun and moonshine, rain, wind, food, and ultimately one's own material body. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated, Stena eva sa, one who does not reciprocate with the demigods by offering them sacrifice is stena, or a thief. Similarly, other living entities such as cows are providing us with innumerable delicious and nutritious foodstuffs. When we wake up in the morning, our mind is refreshed by the sweet singing of birds, and on a hot day, we enjoy the cool shade and breeze of the forest trees. We are accepting service from innumerable living entities, and we are obligated to repay them. Apta means one's own family members, to whom one is certainly obligated according to normal morality, and Nirnam means human society. Until one becomes a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is certainly a product of his society. We receive mundane education, culture, tradition, and protection from the society in which we live, and thus we owe a great debt to society. Of course, our debt to society is not simply to the present order, but to all of our forefathers and ancestors who carefully preserved moral and social customs so that we, their descendants, could live peacefully. Therefore, the word Pitrinam, or forefathers, indicates our debt to previous generations. In fact, the members of the Krishna Consciousness Society are sometimes criticized by materialistic persons for giving too much attention to Krishna rather than working to fulfill all the above-mentioned obligations. In reply to this, the Bhagavatam 4:31-14 states, Yatha taror mula nishechanena tirpyanti tat skandha bujo pashakha. If one waters the root of a tree, automatically all of the branches, twigs, leaves, etc. are also nourished. There is no need for nor any effectiveness in separately pouring water on the branches, twigs, and leaves of a tree. The water has to be placed on the root. Similarly, pranopaharak cha yate indriyanam, food must be placed in the stomach, from where it is automatically distributed to all the limbs of the body. It is foolish to try to nourish the whole body by rubbing food separately on all the bodily limbs. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the source of all existence. Everything is emanating from Krishna. Everything is maintained by Krishna. And at the end, everything will merge to rest in Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the supreme benefactor, friend, protector, and well-wisher of every living entity. And if he is satisfied, then automatically the whole world will become satisfied, just as all of the bodily limbs are strengthened and satisfied when food is duly remitted to the stomach. The example can be given that a man who is working as a personal secretary to a great king has no further obligation to petty minor kings. Undoubtedly, an ordinary person has many obligations within this material world, but according to Bhagavad Gita, Mayaiva Vihitan Hitan, it is actually the Supreme Lord who is giving all benedictions. For example, one receives one's body by the mercy of one's parents. However, sometimes we find that a particular man or woman may become impotent at a given moment. Sometimes a deformed child is born, and sometimes a child is born dead. Often the sexual act fails to produce pregnancy at all. So, although all parents desire a beautiful, highly qualified child, this is often not the case. Thus, it can be understood that ultimately it is by the mercy of the Supreme Lord that a man and woman are able to produce a child by the sexual act. It is by the Lord's mercy that the man's seminal injection is potent and the woman's ovum is fertile. Similarly, it is only by the mercy of the Lord that the child is born in a healthy condition and reaches physical maturity to pursue his own life. If at any stage in the evolution of a human being the Lord's mercy is withdrawn, sudden death or crippling disease occurs. The demigods are also not independent. The words pahritya kartam, giving up other duties, indicate that one should give up any concept that the demigods are separate from Krishna. It is clearly stated in Vedic literature that the demigods are different limbs of the universal body of the Supreme Lord. Further, it is stated in Bhagavad Gita that the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, and that he only is giving intelligence and memory. Thus, our forefathers who carefully preserved cultural traditions were acting with intelligence provided by the Supreme Lord. They certainly were not acting with their own independent intelligence. No one can be intelligent without a brain, and it is only by Krishna's mercy that we receive a human brain. Therefore, if we carefully analyze all of our multifarious obligations towards different classes of living entities, we shall find that in each and every case it is ultimately by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that we have received a particular benediction in life. So although an ordinary person must methodically fulfill all of these various obligations by executing different types of sacrifices and charitable activities for the satisfaction of those who have benefited them, one who is directly serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna at once fulfills all such obligations, because all benedictions ultimately have come from the Lord through the agency of family, forefathers, demigods, etc. The example may be given that sometimes a state government may distribute benefits originally provided by the federal government. So one who becomes the personal secretary or minister to the chief executive of the federal government has no further obligation to the less important representatives of the state government. Therefore, it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:29, Tavat karmani kurvita na nirvidyeta yavata mat kata shravanado va shraddha yavam na jayate. Translation, as long as one is not satisfied, not satiated by fruitive activity, and has not awakened the taste for devotional service by hearing and chanting about the Supreme Lord, one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. The conclusion is that one who is fully surrendered to the devotional service of the Supreme Lord is a first-class human being. People in general are only eager to receive benedictions from demigods, family members, and society because such benedictions are conducive to material sense gratification. Less intelligent persons consider such material progress to be the only goal of life, and thus cannot appreciate the exalted position of pure devotional service to the Lord. Bhakti Yoga, or pure devotional service, is meant to directly please the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Envious materialistic persons propose various arguments to deny that the Supreme Lord even has transcendental senses. The devotees, however, do not waste time doubting the inconceivable beauty, strength, wealth, and geniality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but directly please the Lord's senses through loving service and thus receive the supreme benediction of going back home, back to Godhead. The devotees return to the Lord's abode where life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. No demigod, family member, or forefather can give one an eternal life of bliss and knowledge. However, if one foolishly neglects the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and instead accepts the temporary material body to be everything, then one must certainly perform elaborate sacrifices, austerities, and charity, and fulfill all of the obligations mentioned above. Otherwise, one becomes completely sinful and condemned, even from the material point of view. Om Jnanasmarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadanti Kam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Agutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyas Cha Kripa Sindhuveva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimad Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll read the verse again after this very extensive and perfectly explanatory purport. So the translation for today's text, O King, one who has given up all material duties and has taken full shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, who offers shelter to all, is not indebted to the demigods, great sages, ordinary living beings, relatives, friends, mankind, or even one's forefathers who have passed away, since all such classes of living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. One who has surrendered to the Lord's service has no need to serve such persons separately. So I like referencing Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur by way of insight, and I do believe that this particular purport must have been inspired by his particular commentary. So, and it's an excellent commentary, very extraordinary. It's so precise. So I'll do my best to go into it perhaps with some little extra depth. So right off the bat, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he states that this verse shows that bhakti is devoid of the trouble caused by daily and occasional duties, such as the Shraddha rites, and he uses the word trapanas, and I'm afraid I'm not I don't know Sanskrit, so I'm presuming it's rituals. Is that correct? Would you know? Trapanas. Anyway, so he gives examples of these kinds of rituals or services that are done as rites. So, for example, there has to be reciprocation for the nourishment given by a mother and a father. And there has to be reciprocation for a debt owed to the demigods for supplying rain, wind, sun, moonlight. So the statement made by Srila Vishwanath is that one involved in karmas or materialistic activities for which their reactions is the debtor and the servant of the devas or the demigods. He's a servant of the sages, of living beings, of parents and forefathers. There's a debt that's owed. So the sacrifices actually are 5 in number. So this is if one's involved in materialistic activity with their consequent reactions. So these are the particular sacrifices that one would have to be performing as a person who's functioning just in the regular world, performing materialistic activities. So one would have to do a sacrifice to the demigods, Deva Yagya, Bhuta Yagya, Brahma Yagya, Nir Yagya, and Pitir Yagya. So all these sacrifices to forefathers, demigods, Lord Brahma, etc. So one should perform rituals for destroying debts. And he quotes, Parikshinam Martam Karma Krayet. So this is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and it's from the Smritis. So one should perform rituals to destroy debts. I have this, I've had this opportunity. There's a young couple that has a child, a devotee couple, and it's a very young child, 1 year old little girl. And I see, I was witnessing because I was serving lunch, and I was seeing that how the father places the little girl on his shoulder and then feeds the little girl, and there's this look of complete happiness and peace on the child's face, just receiving nourishment given by the father. So, one can see how a debt can be incurred because one is so helpless, but one is receiving that protection, that care, that nourishment in one's very vulnerable years. Now, and of course that debt stays with one through the years, so there has to be that, it's natural that one thinks, how can one repay the care, the nourishment that one was given by one's parents? So, and of course, expanding it further to demigods on the broader level, supplying water and air and sunlight and moonlight. So all activities are in fact grouped into 3. So there's karma, there's jnana, and there's yoga. So those are the categories of activities. So the activities being done by people obtaining a particular result to gratify their senses, or the demands of their senses, one could say, is called karma. An activity whereby a person has become frustrated by working hard and getting the results of karma, those activities with the desired results, is the activity of inquiry. This is the next category of activity. So the same persons, they've gone through that process of working very hard, trying to please their senses or gratify their senses, and now they come to a point where they actually are making some sort of inquiry. So this is a new activity. Who am I? Why am I frustrated? Why am I confused? What is my position? So it's a new set of activities. So a whole different group of people, much smaller group, starts to perform this kind of activity, an activity of inquiry. So these are the activities of those engaged in a yogic process. And that activity is one where there's an attempt to understand the position of oneself and other living entities in general. And in fact, try to attain a liberated position, free oneself of all this frustration and the confusion that's there. So, so that liberated position is called Brahmabhuta. So out of many thousands of such liberated persons, one can understand what is Krishna. So this is a much smaller category. So it's going beyond just the activity of inquiring. It's actually going to the very source, actually coming to a much more pinpointed understanding. Now, interestingly, Srila Prabhupada has stated that different types of sacrifice to the demigods awaken consciousness of Krishna. So just now we were hearing how there's a necessity to perform sacrifices because one is a debtor. But at the same time, persons in that category who are performing those activities to satisfy their senses, if they are performing sacrifice to the demigods, and it is something that should be done, it actually can awaken consciousness of Krishna. So very interesting. And Srila Prabhupada adds that there are other sacrifices that awaken Krishna consciousness. So in fact, you can go from that category to this very refined category of persons that are actually pinpointedly beginning to understand the source of everything. And the other sacrifices that can awaken Krishna consciousness, and this is Srila Prabhupada, is sacrifice to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, sacrifice in household duties or life, sacrifice in control of the senses, sacrifice in practicing mystic yoga, sacrifice of material possessions, sacrifice in studying the Vedas, and sacrifice in observing the scientific social institution of an ashram dharma. So Srila Prabhupada defines sacrifice as a regulated action. So it's an action you perform very regularly. So it's not random, it's very regular. And the important component is that within that regulated action is the objective of Krishna consciousness. So very interesting. There's that one set of sacrifices that can be performed by persons in the materialistic category or those functioning with materialistic activities. And then there's a set of sacrifices that can be performed by those that are actually in that very small category of persons who are going to the source. So that was a listing, and it's quite an extensive category of sacrifices when you really think about it. So in the category of knowledge acquiring activities, so that was the Jnana category, regarding Krishna, so going further, There's an understanding that simply by engaging oneself in the activities of Krishna consciousness, everything is complete or it's brought to a conclusion. So each action that one performs, if one is making the inquiries, the knowledge acquiring inquiries, and is performing it with Krishna consciousness, then actually one has this understanding and belief that the activity in itself, the particular sacrifice one performs, is in fact complete and perfect. So being so absorbed, so you can see how there's a finite point to those sacrifices compared to sacrifices by persons in the materialistic category, because they're looking to acquire something else, always looking for something else. But for the Krishna conscious person, there's always any sacrifice one's performing and doing it regularly, there's a sense of completion. It's perfect. It's not you looking for something else. It's been done for Krishna, so it's complete and perfect. So being absorbed in transcendental knowledge, a person will think like this: simply by discharging my duties in Krishna consciousness, all other duties will be performed. So that's actually the thinking. So the situation is quite different for the person in Krishna consciousness compared to the persons in the karma category. Because these persons, and these are the words of Srila Vishwanath, they've surrendered completely to Mukunda. So it's like you've given your life to the Supreme Personality of Godhead versus persons engaged in karma. It's quite a different mindset. So Srila Vishwanath gives a simile, and this is the simile, it was also given in the purport. It is just like a person who, on being accepted as the servant of the emperor of the earth, cannot be the servant of the rulers of any ruler of a little state. He's already in the topmost position. He's the servant to the emperor, the person who's controlling all the other kings. So he can't be a servant to some minor king of one state. So this person has given up all prescribed varnashram duties or distinctions, and the word that was used in the verse today was kartam. So the reason this is so is that when one worships Lord Vishnu, all worship of devatas and forefathers are accomplished. So it's quite extraordinary. So to expand further on it, and this is the analogy that is there. As pouring water on the root of a tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, and as supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and limbs of the body, simply worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service automatically satisfies the demigods who are part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's and this is Narada instructing the Prajetas. That's where that quote comes from. It's from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, the 31st chapter, the 14th text. So why this simile, I said analogy, but actually it's a simile because just as, why this simile is appropriate is that this cosmic manifestation has expanded downward, and the root is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he explains this, Lord Krishna explains this himself in Bhagavad Gita 13.1. He says, it is said that there's an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So this is just supporting this particular simile that Narada was using to explain how you can actually, by giving food to the stomach, you're nourishing the limbs and the senses in the same way. When you're actually watering the root of a tree, you're also watering the branches and the leaves. So here's that particular text of the imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and the branches down. Udva mulam adha sakam, advatam prahu avyayam, chandamsi yasya parnani, yastam vedat sa vedavit. So the roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. So of course, this statement of Lord Krishna also echoes this principle of detachment from material activities, this particular text. So the material activities are this banyan tree, this tree of illusion. So from the topmost planet, the whole universe is expanded with so many branches representing the various planetary systems, and the fruits represent the results of the living entities' activities, so religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. So apart from Srila Vishwanath making a distinction regarding the activities of those performing karma versus those performing activities of devotion to Lord Krishna, he also concludes that the devotee has surpassed the qualifications for karma. So just as Srila Prabhupada pointed to the sacrifice to the demigods arousing Krishna consciousness, Srila Vishwanath points to one performing the ritualistic Vedic activities until one becomes detached from material sense gratification. So you notice, it's not wasted, those 5 sacrifices that are being performed by persons who are caught up in karmic activities. It's actually is allowing the person to become detached from material sense gratification, even though they're working hard to try and satisfy their senses. The interesting thing is detachment is happening because the sacrifices are being performed. So Srila Vishwanath, to prove that point, he references Lord Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:20, text 9. As long as one is not satiated by fruitive activity and has not awakened his taste for devotional service, by Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. So you have to be performing these sacrifices if you're engaged in fruitive activity. Because it's actually a regulative principle in the Vedas. It keeps one's life on track, so to speak, moving in the right direction. So the criterion that's used to determine one needing to comply with Vedic injunctions so as not to risk becoming inimical to Krishna, because that's what can happen if you're not performing those sacrifices. You actually start to feel negative towards Lord Krishna. And the criterion that has to be met, is that one who has come to the point of developing clear knowledge of Krishna consciousness and detachment from non-devotional activities. So one has to come to this point of Krishna consciousness and becoming detached from non-devotional activities. So to return to Srila Vishwanath's statement that a devotee has surpassed the qualifications for karma, one can say that one who has developed great faith in devotional service to Lord Krishna does not hesitate to do anything that will further the mission of the Lord. So it's evocative because there's that surrender. One's willing to do anything to further the mission of the Lord. Recently I had this challenge. We were having to do a kirtan experience in a yoga center, and the prasadam had to be prepared, or the cooking had to be done. My last time of cooking big scale was in a temple in New Jersey, like 2 decades ago. So I was so enthusiastic to perform this, even though I haven't done this activity, because most of my service has involved teaching. So anyway, I dived into the preparation, and I found that this is something that I was reflecting on it. One's prepared to do what needs to be done if it'll assist in the furthering the mission of Krishna consciousness. And anyway, there was very positive response. So many persons coming to inquire as to the ingredients and how it is that it tasted a particular way. So I thought, it's so nice that, just the fact that one actually honestly does something to the best of one's ability with the correct intention of furthering the mission of the Lord, then persons are responding. They're actually in some way touched by the prasadam they're receiving. So, so Srila Vishwanath's statement again that devotees have surpassed the qualification for karma. One can say that one who has developed great faith in devotional service to Lord Krishna does not hesitate to do anything that will further the mission of the Lord. And anyone who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, giving up all kinds of obligations, has taken to the path in all seriousness, owes neither duties or obligations to the demigods. That's the point of this verse. The sages or general living entities, even family members, humankind or forefathers. So that's also coming in Srimad Bhagavatam in the same canto, but the 20th chapter, the 10th verse. So taking to the path in all seriousness means that one has developed firm faith in the process of hearing and chanting, because you cannot do this unless you're hearing and chanting. So because this is the means of cleansing one's heart of material dirt. So that's what's allowing that kind of spontaneous action. You could say spontaneous in the sense that one's willing to do it with a mood of surrender. So alongside this process of hearing and chanting, controlling one's senses. So these are sacrifices one is performing. It's just regular. One's controlling one's senses. So one can come to the point of understanding that activities of sense gratification are useless. So one is not actually performing sense gratificatory activities blindly. When one's practicing Krishna consciousness, one is actually always conscious that there's some space that has to be given for the senses, but one is performing the sacrifice of controlling the senses. And one also understands that all one's actions in Krishna consciousness are to allow one to come to really understand that any activities related to pleasing one's own senses are in fact useless. So it takes a long, long, long time. But there's slowly the detachment is happening. So Lord Krishna explains it this way, and this is from Bhagavad Gita 4:40. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues the senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. So that's the outcome. One actually comes to a point of spiritual peacefulness just through regularly going through the sacrifice of controlling one's senses and having that mood of surrender and being willing to perform whatever activities are necessary for furthering the mission of Krishna consciousness. So to reinforce the point of still needing to follow Vedic injunctions and rituals, the category of persons outside of the faithful dedicated to transcendental knowledge are those who have no faith and are doubtful. So there's also that category. No faith, they're completely doubtful. And here's from Bhagavad Gita 4:40, Lord Krishna looking at that category. Ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. they fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world or the next. So that's quite extreme, one could say. There's actually no happiness. So for persons who are outside of the category of still trying to perform their karmas, but doing it with performing sacrifices, who are outside of the category of of activities in yoga where they're making some inquiries, who are outside of the category of the persons who have become one-pointed in their attention, meaning inquiring about Lord Krishna, the category of persons who doubt the scriptures, they don't come to God consciousness. So there's no happiness for them. I'm dealing with such a person recently. And it's interesting. Generally in the Western world, there isn't exposure to the Vedas. So persons may not know that they actually are debtors to the demigods, that there's actually some need to, perform sacrifices. So when there's not that understanding and is merely about gratifying one's own senses, the person's always under illusion that they're in happiness. So I'm dealing with a person who's now the karmic reaction is coming where there's a disease has come to the body. So one thing's, let me just inquire of the person how they're doing. The person doesn't even have the mental strength to accept that one is wishing them well, because karma is there and there's suffering, there's great suffering, and there's no shelter of anything. And when there's no shelter of anything, a person doesn't even have the mental strength to be able to respond in a cordial way. Rather, it's like their suffering is so intense that they even push one away. So this is this idea that persons in that category who doubt the revealed scriptures don't attain God consciousness, and in fact there's no happiness for them, not in this life or in the next life. So it's quite extreme. And Srila Prabhupada explains, men without faith in God and his revealed word find no good in this world nor in the next. For them there is no happiness whatsoever. It's quite extreme. It is for this reason that the second category of persons who follow principles of revealed scriptures with faith, they actually get raised to the platform of knowledge. So only this knowledge will help one be promoted to the transcendental position of spiritual understanding. So that was an attempt to look a little bit further with a very excellent purport that probably didn't require anybody to give a class. It was so perfect. But a little attempt to look at it more closely. So if there's anything that's come to mind that may expand our discussion, please feel free to contribute.
Thank you for your class, Mathaji. Seems like a super important class. This sums up a lot of things. I remember hearing in the Krishna book, it's in the first part. I don't know exactly where, but I remember hearing this, that it says any person who has no other objective or whatever than to serving the Lord is to be considered a demigod. Have you ever heard that? It's in the Krishna book. When the person's life is fully dedicated to serving the Lord, then they're considered a demigod. Like, you know how you say it's only demigods and demons.
That the person who's dedicated their life to serving the Supreme Lord is in fact a demigod.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, it's, I guess it's apt from the point of view that the consciousness is on a much more elevated level. compared to a regular human being. But there's still that necessity to be performing that sacrifice to control the senses. And so that implies that there's still that need for some sense gratification. So the demigods have that difficulty. There's the mood of enjoyment. So, but the consciousness is on an elevated level. So it would make perfect sense. Thank you. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and I'm sorry if it was there was some areas where it's induced dozing off, but I'm grateful for the listening that took place. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.